Hey, welcome. This is a devotional from the You Need Faith in Jesus team. Today, we're going to walk through one of the most real and raw prayers in the whole Bible, Psalm 143. This isn't just some ancient poem. It's King David's playbook for how to talk to God when you feel like you're at the absolute end of your rope. So let's jump right in.
Have you ever been there? That place where you just feel completely crushed. The pressure's overwhelming, and it feels like you're just alone in the dark. David knew that feeling, maybe better than anyone, and he wrote this prayer from that exact spot, which is why it's so powerful for us today.
So, when everything is falling apart, where do you even start? Well, what David does here is pretty amazing. He doesn't begin with his long list of problems. No, he starts by reminding himself, and God, of who God is. Now listen to the reason he gives. He's not saying, God, answer me because I've been so good lately or because I deserve it. Not at all. He says, answer me because you are faithful and because you are righteous. The whole prayer is built on the rock-solid foundation of God's character, not his own. And then he gets incredibly humble and honest. David, a man God called a man after his own heart, basically says, God, please don't put me on trial. Because if you did, I wouldn't stand a chance. Nobody would. He knows he can't be made right with God based on his own actions. He's throwing himself completely on God's mercy. It's the very same truth the Apostle Paul would write about centuries later in Romans chapter 3. Okay, so now that he's established who he's talking to, David gets brutally honest about his situation. He doesn't sugarcoat the pain he's in one bit. Wow, you can just feel the heaviness in those words, can't you? This is so much more than a bad day. He's talking about a full-on spiritual attack. He feels hunted, smashed down, and left in a darkness so complete it feels like the grave. And you know what? That kind of raw honesty is so important in a life of faith. Just telling God exactly how it feels. And you see the result, right? The attack from the outside has caused a total collapse on the inside. His spirit is completely swamped, and its heart, it's desolate. That's a word that means numb, empty, just gone. But here's the most important part. Even from this place of total emotional shutdown, he's still talking to God. And this is the pivot point of the whole psalm. Right here, at his absolute lowest, buried in the darkness, David makes a conscious choice. He refuses to just stay stuck there, and what he does next changes everything. And that choice he makes is to turn. He deliberately shifts his focus away from the size of his problems and turns his attention to the greatness of his God. You see that? Instead of replaying the attacks of the enemy in his mind, he chooses to remember. He intentionally starts thinking about God's track record. He calls to mind all the times God has been faithful in the past, for him, for his family, for his nation. And this isn't just a quick passing thought. It's a real spiritual workout. You can break it down into 3 steps. First, he remembers. He brings the facts of God's past victories to mind. Then he meditates. He chews on them, thinking about what they mean. And finally, he muses, which is like having a conversation with himself about how awesome God is. Seriously, remembering what God has done in the past is the fuel for our faith in the future. And just look what happens when he does this. His whole posture changes. He goes from being crushed on the ground to stretching his hands out to God in complete surrender and longing. He suddenly realizes that his deepest need isn't just for his problems to go away. His deepest need is for God himself. His soul is like a dry, cracked desert, and only God's presence can bring the rain. So now that his perspective has shifted, now that his focus is back on God, his prayers become laser-focused and full of faith. He knows exactly what to ask for. Man, what an incredible prayer to start your day with. He's basically asking for 2 things. First, let me hear your loving kindness. He wants a fresh experience of God's love to start his day. And second, show me the way I should walk. He wants practical, step-by-step guidance. It's really that simple. A 2-part request for the morning. First, connect with God's love. Ask him to make you feel it, to hear it deep in your soul. Then, ask for direction. God, what's the next right step for me today? What a perfect model for our own prayers each morning. So what's his battle plan for his enemies? It's simple. He runs straight to God. He's not trying to fight this thing with his own cleverness or strength. He just says, God, you are my hiding place. I'm running to you for safety.
That is always the best first move in any spiritual battle. Now the prayer shifts again and goes even deeper. David isn't just asking to be rescued from his problems anymore, he's actually asking God to change him. I just love this part. His ultimate goal is simply to do God's will. He asks God to be his personal teacher. He asks the Holy Spirit to lead him onto level ground, onto a path of righteousness. He doesn't just want to be saved from his trouble. He wants to be saved to a life that honors God.
And listen to his motivation here. This is so important. He asks God to revive his spirit, not just so he can feel better, but for thy name's sake. He asks God to bring him out of trouble for thy righteousness' sake. He understands that when God rescues one of his children, it makes God's name and reputation look good to the watching world. He's connecting his personal crisis to God's big picture glory.
And that brings us to the end of the prayer, where David makes one last bold request and basically places the entire outcome in God's hands. Now, I know that can sound a little harsh to our modern ears, but it's so important to see this for what it is. This is not a cry for personal revenge. This is a plea for divine justice. He's handing over the desire for vengeance to the only one who is a truly righteous judge. He's saying, God, I'm your servant. I trust you, my master, to deal with this justly. It's about letting God be God. So, if we put it all together, this psalm gives us an incredible roadmap for praying when we're in despair. Number 1, start with God's character. 2, be painfully honest about your pain. 3, make the choice to remember his goodness. 4, ask for that morning dose of his love and guidance. 5, surrender your will to his. And 6, leave all justice in his capable hands. So, I'll leave you with this one question to think about today. What is one specific thing, just one, that God has done for you in the past? What's one time he showed up? I want you to choose to remember that today. Think about it, meditate on it, and let that memory be the thing that brings a little bit of light and hope into whatever you're facing right now. Thanks so much for joining me.